If you're a self-development junkie like me, I guarantee you're not reading enough fiction. Don't get me wrong, any kind of reading is good for us. It helps our brains to learn to focus on one topic for much longer than it's used to. It helps us learn about new topics or explore new worlds. It keeps our minds active. But if you're like me, you're probably reading way too much of one category. My wife and I recently went to the library to get our library cards for the first time since moving here, and it had me excited to say the least. Up until that point, I had been purchasing most of the books I was reading, whether that was Star Wars books or getting self-development audiobooks digitally. When I was in the library, it felt like being a kid again. As I looked around the shelves, there were already so many books I knew I wanted to explore. The first section I went to was the nonfiction self-development section, and I pulled a few books off the shelf. One was about telling stories through marketing, and another was about the psychology behind being productive and habit change. I carried the 3 books I picked out, and we headed over to the fiction section. I actually felt really intrigued. I couldn't remember the last time I had read a book of fiction that wasn't Star Wars, and I wanted to reread Lord of the Rings, to read Dune, to try a new book. A book called Denton's Still Not Dead caught my eye, and I turned it over and read the summary. It intrigued me, and suddenly the nonfiction self-help type books in my hand seemed somehow less interesting. It was in that moment I realized I had been oversaturating myself with self-development content. As I mentioned, most of the books I had been reading up until that point were either Star Wars books or self-development books, and that's all I had read for years. I had read countless books on habit change, being more focused, getting rid of the distraction of technology, and finding purpose. The only YouTubers I watched regularly were self-development creators like Matt D'Avella and Nathaniel Drew. I seemed to be inundating myself with all these theories of how to live a focused, successful, and fulfilling life, constantly surrounding myself with practices to become a better person. And at the time, I just didn't have anywhere else to go within the space. I had already spent so much time consuming self-development content that I knew what I wanted my habit change routine to look like. I knew what I wanted my productivity practices and my workflow to look like. All I had left was to actually execute, to actually do something on my own. Reading one more book on habit change wasn't going to change my life. Work harder, wake up at 3 a.m., plan every minute of your day, save every dollar you earn, meditate 12 hours a day, get rid of your emotions, become a robot. But seriously, at the library, I think that's why I wasn't excited about reading another self-help book. Reading fiction unlocked a part of my brain that I hadn't realized was dormant until that moment, and that's creative inspiration. I needed to allow myself to just enjoy something, to read something for fun, and to allow myself to feel creatively inspired. And Denton Little was a lot of fun. It was one of those young adult books that wraps up a heartwarming and thought-provoking message about life into a fun, easily digestible story. And as I was reading fiction, I felt really inspired. I felt excited in a way I hadn't in a while. It reminded me that no matter how productive or focused or mindful I got, creativity requires some inspiration. Whether it's something we live in our lives or something we live vicariously through other stories, we need to find inspiration to be creative. I think those of us in the self-development community can easily get caught up into the drive to constantly push for more, to constantly optimize their daily routines, to work harder, to be more focused, to read all of the recommended books on finance, on productivity, on habit change, to create a life that's as optimized as possible. That feeling can happen with books, and it can happen with motivational content online. We see a motivational video on YouTube or Instagram, and we might feel pumped up for a few minutes after, but ultimately we just scroll to the next video, to the next piece of content, and the feeling wears off. And as we inundate ourselves with these motivational videos or content, I think they can almost lose their effectiveness. We start to know that the feeling will wear off quickly without making any lasting change, so we don't even try to make change. I think our brains can subconsciously convince itself that the consumption is change in itself, as if it's a first step toward habit change or toward productivity. We feel good about the consumption, and it is a first step, but only if it's followed up by other steps. Otherwise, it's just a step toward nowhere. So if you're like me and you're stuck in that cycle of constantly consuming self-development content, of constantly pushing yourself and feeling like you need to be better without making any lasting change in your life, it might be time to take a step back and read some fiction. You need to allow yourself to just enjoy something for once, to distract yourself from this constant pursuit of productivity and perfection, to just enjoy someone else's work. Whether or not your goals are creative, really immersing yourself in someone else's story and just enjoying it for what it is can be the inspiration you need to be able to break that mental cycle. Thanks for watching. I'm Nathan, I'm 24, and I recently got married, moved across the country, and started my first real job. I'm in a period of a lot of change, and I'm trying to figure out exactly who I am and what my place is in this world. So if you're interested in following along on my journey of self-development and self-discovery, be sure to hit that subscribe button.